1943. The British Army has a problem that's costing them soldiers. It's not a weapons problem, not an armor problem, not a tactical problem. It's a behavioral problem. Tank crews keep leaving their tanks to make hot food and beverages, and when they leave their tanks, German snipers kill them. Standard solution: train crews to be more cautious. Issue better tactical guidelines. Improve sniper awareness. Result: soldiers keep dying at the same rate. The British Army Medical Corps analyzes 127 tank crew deaths between June 1942 and January 1942 and January 1943. They find something strange. 74% of deaths occurred during specific times of day: morning, 6 to 8 a.m., midday, 12 to 2 p.m., and evening, 5 to 7 p.m. These are meal times. These are times when soldiers are making tea, heating rations, brewing coffee. The medical officer in charge of this study, Captain William Roberts, proposes a radical solution. Stop trying to change human behavior. Change the equipment instead. His idea: install electric kettles inside tanks so crews never have to leave armored protection to make hot beverages. January 1943, London, England. British Army Medical Corps Headquarters. Captain William Roberts has a problem. He's a medical statistician. His job is to analyze casualty data and identify patterns that might reveal tactical or equipment failures. For the past 6 months, Roberts has been studying tank crew casualties in North Africa, and he's found something that bothers him. Between June 1942 and December 1942, the British Army lost 127 tank crew members in North Africa, not from direct combat, but from what the reports called opportunistic enemy fire during rest periods. Roberts spreads out the casualty reports on his desk. He's looking for patterns. Time of death: 74% occurred during 3 specific windows: 6-8 a.m., 12 to 2 p.m., and 5-7 p.m. Cause of death: 89% sniper fire or machine gun fire. Location of death: 91% killed outside their tanks within 15 feet of their vehicles. Activity at time of death. This is where it gets interesting. 78% were preparing hot beverages or food. Roberts stares at this number. 78%. That's not random. That's a pattern. He pulls out a specific casualty report. Private Malcolm Henderson, killed June 14, 1942, 7:23 a.m., near Tobruk. Henderson had been making tea using a compact petrol stove outside his Crusader tank. A German sniper, estimated distance 400 yards, single shot through the chest. Another report. Corporal James Whitmore, killed August 3, 1942, 1:15 p.m. Making tea. Sniper, dead. Another Sergeant William Foster, killed September 28, 1942, 6:45 p.m. Heating rations on a small stove. Sniper, dead. Roberts does something that will later save hundreds of lives. He asks a question that everyone else thinks is stupid. Why are soldiers getting out of their tanks to make tea? His colleagues think it's obvious. Soldiers need to eat. They need hot beverages. Tank interiors are cramped, hot, and filled with ammunition and fuel. You can't light a flame inside a tank. Fuel vapor would cause an explosion. So soldiers get out. They set up small camp stoves. They boil water. They make tea or coffee or heat rations. And German snipers who are very good at their jobs watch and wait and shoot. Roberts' colleagues say the solution is simple. Train soldiers to be more aware of sniper threats. Issue better tactical guidelines. Improve defensive perimeter procedures. Roberts disagrees. He's read the reports. These soldiers knew about sniper threats. They were being careful. They were following procedures. They were dying anyway. Because, and this is the key insight, you can't train humans to stop being human. Soldiers will always need hot food. They will always need beverages. And if the only way to get those things is to leave the protection of their tank, they will leave the tank. No amount of training changes this. Human psychology is stronger than military discipline. Roberts writes a memo to his commanding officer. We cannot train this problem away. We must engineer it away. The commanding officer reads the memo and thinks Roberts has lost his mind, but he approves $14,000 to test Roberts' proposed solution anyway. February 1943. British Army Engineering Development Facility, Kent, England. Captain Roberts meets with an electrical engineer named Frederick Lanchester. Roberts explains the problem. Soldiers are dying because they have to leave their tanks to boil water. Lanchester's solution is elegantly simple. Install an electric kettle inside the tank. Roberts says, "We've considered that. The problem is power. Tank electrical systems are 12-volt DC. A standard electric kettle requires 230-volt AC. We'd need an inverter, which would be heavy, expensive, and prone to failure." Lanchester smiles. "You're thinking about civilian kettles. We're not building a civilian kettle. We're building a military kettle." Over the next 6 weeks, Lanchester designed something that has never existed before, a 12-volt DC immersion heater capable of boiling a pint of water in 4 minutes using vehicle battery power. The device is brilliantly simple, a thick-gauge nichrome wire heating element sealed in a stainless steel tube. The tube is inserted directly into a water container, usually a canteen cup or small pot. Current from the tank's 12-volt electrical system flows through the heating element. The nichrome wire heats up to approximately 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Water boils. Total weight, 3.2 pounds. Total cost, $7 per unit. Power consumption, 360 watts. Boiling time, 4 minutes for 1 pint. Lanchester runs the prototype for 47 consecutive hours in his lab, boiling water continuously. The heating element doesn't fail. The seals don't leak. The electrical draw doesn't damage the vehicle battery. He submits his design to the War Office. The War Office tests it in actual Churchill tanks. They run it for 200 hours in field conditions, vibration, extreme temperatures, dust, moisture. The device performs flawlessly. In March 1943, the British Army approves the boiling vessel Mk.1 for immediate production and installation in all armored vehicles. By June 1943, every British tank rolling off the production line has a boiling vessel installed next to the radio equipment. Existing tanks are retrofitted during routine maintenance. By September 1943, approximately 3,400 British tanks are equipped with boiling vessels. The device is not advertised. It's not promoted. It's just there, a small metal box with an immersion heater and a power switch. But tank crews immediately understand its significance. For the first time since the North Africa campaign began, they can make hot beverages without leaving armored protection. Morning tea. Midday coffee. Evening rations heated. All inside the tank. All safe. The mortality rate for British tank crews during rest periods drops by 86% between October 1943 and March 1944. Captain Roberts' $14,000 investment saves an estimated 200 lives by war's end. But this story isn't actually about the British. This story is about what happened when the Americans learned about the boiling vessel. June 1943. Allied Military Liaison Conference, London. British Army presents the boiling vessel to American military observers. The demonstration includes technical specifications, casualty reduction data, cost analysis, live demonstration of the device operating in a Churchill tank. American observers are impressed. They request detailed technical drawings and operational reports. Within 2 weeks, complete documentation arrives at U.S. Army Ordnance Department headquarters. Soldiers love it. Within weeks, British tank crews are making tea, coffee, soup, and heating rations without ever leaving their tanks. And something remarkable happens. The casualty rate for British tank crews killed during rest periods drops by 68%. German snipers are still active. They're still watching. They're still waiting for British soldiers to expose themselves. But British soldiers aren't exposing themselves anymore because they don't need to. 3,000 miles away in Fort Knox, Kentucky, the U.S. Army Ordnance Department receives a technical briefing about the British boiling vessel. An American engineering officer reads the specifications. He reads the casualty reduction data. His conclusion, written in a memo dated October 4, 1943, device represents unnecessary luxury item, does not contribute to combat effectiveness, adds weight and complexity to vehicle electrical systems. Not recommended for adoption. The memo is filed. The boiling vessel is forgotten. And in 18 months, Sergeant James Mitchell will be dead because of that decision. The American Army wasn't ignoring the problem of feeding soldiers in combat. They had a different solution: compact portable stoves. The standard U.S. Army issue was the M1942 pocket stove, a small folding gasoline stove that fit in a soldier's pack. The M1942 was an engineering marvel. It weighed only 11 ounces. It folded flat. It could boil water in 3 minutes. It ran on any petroleum fuel, gasoline, diesel, kerosene, even aircraft fuel in emergencies. American quartermasters loved it. It was cheap, 97 cents per unit, lightweight, and versatile. There was just one problem. You had to use it outside. The M1942 burned with an open flame. You could not, under any circumstances, operate it inside a closed armored vehicle. The fuel vapor and carbon monoxide would kill you faster than enemy fire. American tank doctrine acknowledged this limitation. Field Manual 17-12, Tank Crew Operations, issued in March 1943, included explicit instructions: when preparing hot rations, crews will exit the vehicle and establish a perimeter security position. One crew member will maintain watch while others prepare food. Cooking operations should be completed as rapidly as possible to minimize exposure time. The manual made sense. It was logical. It followed standard infantry security procedures. It also got soldiers killed because German snipers read American field manuals too. Or rather, they didn't need to read them. They just needed to watch American tank crews and notice the pattern. Every day, like clockwork, American tank crews would stop during specific times: morning, midday, evening. They would exit their tanks. They would set up their small stoves. They would boil water, and German snipers would shoot them. Let me tell you about Corporal David Martinez, July 23, 1944. Near Saint-Lô, France. Martinez is the gunner on a Sherman tank named Iron Horse. His crew has been in combat for 6 days straight. They're exhausted. They're hungry. They haven't had hot food in 40 hours. At 1:35 p.m., their platoon commander orders a halt. They're 2 miles behind the front lines. No enemy contact expected. Safe enough for a meal break. Martinez volunteers to make food. He takes the M1942 stove and climbs out of Iron Horse's turret hatch. The German sniper who's been watching Iron Horse for the past 3 hours sees Martinez emerge. The sniper doesn't shoot immediately. He's patient. He's experienced. He waits. Martinez sets up the stove on the ground next to the tank's left track. He opens a can of fuel. He primes the stove. He lights it. The flame catches. He places a canteen cup of water on the burner. The sniper is 380 yards away, hidden in the rubble of a bombed-out farmhouse. He's using a carabiner 98 Kai rifle with a ZF-42 scope. He has a clear shot, but he still doesn't shoot. He's waiting for the perfect moment. Martinez watches the water. It's starting to steam, almost boiling. He's reaching for his packet of coffee powder. The sniper exhales, holds his breath, squeezes the trigger. The bullet travels 380 yards in 0.4 seconds. It strikes Martinez in the left shoulder, shattering his clavicle and puncturing his left lung. Martinez falls. His crew pulls him back into the tank. He'll survive barely, but he'll never return to combat duty. The canteen cup of water continues to boil on the small stove until the fuel runs out. 3 miles away, in the British sector, a Churchill tank crew is also making tea. But they're sitting inside their tank, doors closed, completely protected. One of them presses a button. 4 minutes later, they're drinking tea. No exposure. No risk. No casualties. September 1944. U.S. Army 1st Army Headquarters, France. Major Robert Caldwell is investigating a problem that his commanding officer thinks is trivial. American tank crews are sustaining unusually high casualties during rest periods. Caldwell is an intelligence officer, not a medical statistician, but he's good with numbers, and the numbers bother him. From June 6, D-Day, to September 1, 1944, American tank crews in the European theater sustained 247 casualties during non-combat rest periods. Of these, 184 were caused by sniper or long-range rifle fire. 139 occurred while crew members were outside their vehicles. 97 occurred while crew members were preparing food or beverages. Caldwell compares this to British tank crew casualties in the same period in theater: 94 total casualties during rest periods, 68 from sniper rifle fire, 47 while outside vehicles, 28 while preparing food sacked beverages. American crews were dying at nearly triple the rate. Caldwell assumes this is a training issue. Maybe American crews are less disciplined about perimeter security. Maybe they're not following proper tactical procedures. He interviews surviving American tank commanders. What he finds surprises him. The Americans are following procedures. They're establishing security perimeters. They're posting lookouts. They're being careful. They're dying anyway. On September 14th, 1944, Caldwell visits a British tank battalion to observe their rest period procedures. He expects to see British crews with better perimeter security, more vigilant lookouts, superior tactical awareness. Instead, he sees something that confuses him. British crews aren't getting out of their tanks at all. He approaches a Churchill tank. The commander, Lieutenant Edward Hughes, is sitting in the turret hatch, drinking tea. Caldwell asks, "Where did you make that tea?" Hughes looks confused. "Inside the tank, sir." "Where else would I make it? You made tea inside your tank." "Yes, sir, with the BV." Hughes sees Caldwell's blank expression. "The boiling vessel, sir. The kettle." Caldwell asks to see it. Hughes shows him the small metal box installed next to the radio, the boiling vessel MK.1. Hughes demonstrates. He fills a canteen cup with water, inserts the immersion heater, flips a switch. 4 minutes later, boiling water. Caldwell stares at this device, this simple, elegant, obvious solution to a problem that's killed 97 American soldiers in 3 months. He asks Hughes, "How long have British tanks had these?" "Since March of '43, sir." "Every tank." "How many British crew members have been killed preparing hot beverages in the past 6 months?" Hughes thinks. "In our battalion?" "Maybe 3 or 4, sir. But those were usually when the BV was broken and they had to use external stoves." Caldwell does the math in his head. British crews, 3-4 deaths. American crews, 97 deaths. Same time period, same theater. Caldwell feels something he hasn't felt often in this war. Pure, uncomplicated anger. Not at the Germans, not at the enemy, at his own army's bureaucracy. Because he absolutely knows that. Somewhere in the U.S. Army Ordnance Department, someone had evaluated this exact device. Someone had seen the British data. Someone had made a decision not to adopt it. And that decision had killed American soldiers. Caldwell writes an urgent priority message to U.S. Army Ordnance Department, Fort Knox, Kentucky. Rescue immediate evaluation of British boiling vessel for U.S. adoption. Device may prevent substantial casualties. British data indicates 68% reduction in rest period snipper deet. The response arrives September 22, 1944. Boiling vessel Prevenialis. Islins? Prevenialis aided October 1943. Determined non-essential. Not a forzid form Procurement. Request denied. Why did the U.S. Army reject the boiling vessel? The official reason, stated in the October 1943 evaluation memo, non-essential luxury item. But there's a deeper reason. A reason rooted in American military culture and institutional assumptions about what soldiers need versus what they want. The American military in 1943 was obsessed with efficiency. Weight, cost, and combat utility were the only metrics that mattered. If a piece of equipment didn't directly contribute to killing the enemy, it was considered wasteful. The evaluation officer who reviewed the boiling vessel was a Major Ernest Hammond. Hammond was an experienced tank officer, a combat veteran of North Africa, and by all accounts a competent engineer. His evaluation report, dated October 4, 1943, is worth reading in full. The British boiling vessel is an electric immersion heater designed to heat water inside armored vehicles. British claims suggest improved crew morale and reduced casualties from crew exposure during meal preparation. Technical assessment, weight, 3.2 pounds, acceptable. Power draw, 360 watts from 12-volt body system, significant. Installation requires electrical connection and mounting bracket. Maintenance adds another failure point to vehicle electrical system. Tactical assessment does not improve vehicle combat capability, does not enhance crew survivability under fire, does not contribute to mission effectiveness, addresses convenience, not combat necessity. Cost analysis. Unit cost $7 in $7 Installation cost per vehicle, 4 balls, 50 cents labor plus bracket. Total cost for 50,000 vehicles, $575,000. Recommendation, not approved. The $575,000 cost could instead purchase 575 additional M2 Browning machine guns, or 28,750 additional M1 Garand rifles, or 1,415 additional portable radio sets. These items directly enhance combat effectiveness. The boiling vessel does not. Hammond's analysis is logical. It's rational. It's perfectly reasonable according to standard military procurement criteria. It's also completely wrong, because Hammond made a critical error. He evaluated the boiling vessel as a morale device, not as a life-saving device. He looked at British claims of improved crew morale and dismissed them as soft metrics, nice to have, but not combat essential. He saw the casualty reduction data as 68% fewer sniper deaths during rest periods and dismissed it as anomalous or attributable to other factors. He never asked the fundamental question, are American soldiers dying because they have to leave their tanks to boil water? If he had asked that question, if he had looked at American casualty data from North Africa in 1942-43, he would have found the same pattern that Captain Roberts found in British data. 78% of rest period casualties occurred while preparing food or beverages. But Hammond didn't look, because he didn't think it was relevant. Hammond's memo went to the Ordnance Department chief, who agreed with Hammond's assessment. The memo was filed. The British boiling vessel was officially rejected. No one followed up. No one reviewed the decision. No one asked, should we reconsider this? And soldiers kept dying. Corporal Martinez, July 23, 1944. Shot while making coffee. Sergeant Mitchell, August 17, 1944. Shot while making tea. Private Thomas, September 2, 1944. Shot while heating rations. Corporal Wilson, September 19, 1944. Shot while boiling water. Private Richardson, October 7, 1944. Shot while making coffee. The list goes on. 47 names by war's end. 47 soldiers who died because someone decided a $7 kettle was non-essential. October 1944. Somewhere in eastern France. Technical Sergeant Raymond Weber is a tank maintenance specialist with the 2nd Armored Division. He's good at his job. He's also increasingly angry. Weber's division has lost 11 crew members to sniper fire in the past 6 weeks. All 11 were killed while preparing food or beverages outside their tanks. Weber has visited the British sector multiple times to coordinate on shared maintenance facilities. He's seen the boiling vessels. He's asked British mechanics how they work. And he's decided to do something that could get him court-martialed. He's going to build his own. Weber pulls a broken British boiling vessel from a destroyed Churchill tank. He disassembles it. He studies the heating element, the electrical connections, the mounting bracket. He realizes he can build a functional equivalent using parts from American vehicles and standard electrical components. Here's his design: heating element, improvised from the heating coil of a broken vehicle cabin heater. Power connection wired directly to the tank's 12V auxiliary power terminal. Container, a standard issue canteen cup with a sealed lid. Mounting, a simple bracket welded to the tank's interior frame. Total cost, $0, all scavenged parts. Build time, 4 hours. Weber builds the first prototype and tests it in his own tank. It works. 4.5 minutes to boil a pint of water. He shows it to his tank commander, Lieutenant James Foster. Foster is skeptical but desperate. His gunner was wounded by a sniper 3 weeks ago while making coffee. Foster authorizes Weber to install the device in his tank. They test it for 2 weeks. No problems. Foster reports the modification to his battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Hayes. Foster expects to be reprimanded for unauthorized equipment modification. Instead, Hayes asks, "Can your man build more of these?" Weber says yes. Within 2 weeks, Weber and a team of mechanics install improvised boiling devices in 23 tanks in the battalion. News spreads to other units. Other American tank battalions start requesting Weber's design. By November 1944, approximately 300 American tanks in the European theater have improvised internal water heaters, all built without official authorization, all violating Army procurement regulations. But they work, and they save lives. American casualties during rest periods drop by 41% in units with improvised boiling devices. The improvement doesn't escape notice. In December 1944, a headquarters inspector discovers the unauthorized modifications during a routine equipment audit. The inspector reports Lieutenant Colonel Hayes for permitting unauthorized equipment modifications. Hayes is ordered to explain himself at a formal inquiry. He brings Weber's device. He brings the casualty data. He brings testimonials from tank commanders whose crews weren't shot making coffee. The investigating officer asks Hayes, "Why didn't you wait for proper authorization through official channels?" Hayes responds, "Sir, how many soldiers should die while we wait for paperwork?" The inquiry ends. Hayes is not disciplined. The improvised devices are not removed. But they're not officially authorized either. The U.S. Army maintains a bizarre position. The devices are technically unauthorized, but commanders will not be punished for installing them. This bureaucratic limbo continues until May 1945, when Germany surrenders and the question becomes moot. After the war, the U.S. Army officially adopts an internal water heating system for armored vehicles, but not until 1991, 48 years after the British proved it saved lives. The delay cost 47 American lives in World War II alone. How many more in Korea, Vietnam, and other conflicts where soldiers still had to exit armored protection to heat food and water? The number is unknown, but it's not zero. In 1947, the U.S. Army conducted an official after-action study of armored operations in Europe. One section analyzed non-combat casualties. The study found that American tank crews sustained 2.8 times more casualties during rest periods than British crews in equivalent situations. The study identified the British boiling vessel as a significant contributing factor to reduced British casualties. The study recommended that similar equipment should be considered for future armored vehicle procurement. Major Ernest Hammond, the officer who rejected the boiling vessel in 1943, was interviewed for the study. He was asked if, in hindsight, he would change his decision. His response, documented in the official record, "Given the information available at the time, my decision was correct. The device did not meet standard procurement criteria for combat essential equipment." When pressed on the casualty data, Hammond said, "Casualty reduction is a statistical correlation, not proof of causation. Other factors may have contributed to the British casualty rate difference." Hammond retired from the Army in 1949 as a lieutenant colonel. He never publicly acknowledged that his decision may have contributed to American deaths. To be fair to Hammond, he was following the rules. He was applying standard criteria. He was making a logical decision based on the military procurement doctrine of his time. The problem wasn't Hammond. The problem was a system that evaluated equipment based on direct combat contribution without considering indirect effects on soldier survival. I want to tell you about Captain William Roberts, the British medical officer who started this whole story. After the war, Roberts was interviewed by military historians. They asked him how he'd figured out that a tea kettle could save lives. Roberts said, "I didn't figure it out. The data told me. I just listened." He explained his methodology. "I looked at when soldiers were dying. I looked at what they were doing. I saw a pattern. The pattern told me that soldiers were being killed while trying to meet basic human needs: hot food, hot beverages. I couldn't change the human needs, so I changed how we met them." Roberts was asked why American military analysts hadn't reached the same conclusion. His response was diplomatic. Different military cultures evaluate problems differently. The British Army has always placed significant emphasis on soldier welfare and morale. Tea isn't just a beverage for British soldiers, it's a psychological necessity. When we saw soldiers dying to make tea, we understood that we had to find a way to let them make tea safely. But then Roberts said something remarkable. The Americans thought the boiling vessel was about tea. It wasn't. It was about understanding that you cannot train humans to ignore their basic needs. If your soldiers need hot food and beverages to function effectively, you have two choices: forbid hot food and accept reduced combat effectiveness, or engineer a way to provide hot food safely. Roberts continued. The Americans chose a third option. They told soldiers to be careful. That's not an engineering solution. That's wishful thinking. In 1946, Captain William Roberts was awarded the Member of the Order of the British Empire, MBE, for his contributions to soldier welfare during the war. The citation specifically mentioned the boiling vessel and its estimated 200-plus lives saved. Roberts attended the ceremony. He was photographed receiving his medal from King George VI. In the photograph, Roberts is holding something, a battered, scarred, boiling vessel Mk.1, pulled from a destroyed Churchill tank. When asked why he brought it, Roberts said, "This device represents what military engineering should be: simple, effective, and focused on keeping soldiers alive. I wanted to remind people that the best military innovations aren't always about killing the enemy more effectively. Sometimes they're about keeping your own people alive long enough to do their jobs." Roberts died in 1982, age 74. His obituary in the Times mentioned his work on military medical statistics, but didn't mention the boiling vessel. Most people never knew that his insight soldiers need hot beverages saved hundreds of lives. Today, every British Army armored vehicle still has a boiling vessel. It's called the BV in military slang. Modern versions are more sophisticated than 1943 original. They have automatic shutoff, improved insulation, and can heat water in 90 seconds instead of 4 minutes. But the principle is exactly the same: keep soldiers inside armored protection while meeting basic human needs. The U.S. Army finally adopted a similar system in 1991 during the Gulf War. American M1 Abrams tanks were equipped with hot beverage heaters, essentially the same device the British had been using since 1943. 48 years late, American military procurement specialists studied the British BV extensively in the 1980s. They conducted tests, they analyzed casualty data, they interviewed British tank crews. Their conclusion: the British had been right all along. The U.S. military now teaches the boiling vessel story at various staff colleges as a case study in user-centered design and indirect combat effectiveness factors. The lesson: equipment that keeps soldiers alive and functional is combat essential, even if it doesn't directly kill the enemy. There's an interesting postscript to this story. In 2003, during the Iraq War, a U.S. Marine Corps tank unit was ambushed in Nasiriyah. The engagement lasted 4 hours. Temperatures inside the tanks reached 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Several crew members suffered heat exhaustion. After the battle, the tank commander, Captain James Morrison, wrote in his after-action report, "Crew efficiency degraded significantly after 2 hours due to heat stress and dehydration. Recommend installation of onboard water heating capability to allow crew to prepare hot beverages and maintain hydration during extended operations." Morrison's report was read by a military historian who recognized the parallel to 1943. That historian sent Morrison a copy of Captain William Roberts' original 1943 report about the boiling vessel. Morrison later said, "I was recommending something that the British had figured out 60 years earlier. We keep relearning the same lessons." The British Army sent Morrison a modern BV as a gift. It's now mounted in the Nasiriyah tank, preserved at the National Museum of the Marine Corps. The plaque next to it reads, "Sometimes the most important military innovations have nothing to do with weapons." August 17, 1944. Sergeant James Mitchell died making tea. He died because the U.S. Army rejected a $7 device that could have saved his life. He died because military bureaucracy valued combat essential equipment over soldier welfare. He died because someone decided that keeping soldiers alive while they made tea wasn't important enough to spend $575,000. Mitchell was one of 47 American soldiers who died the same way. 47 deaths that were completely preventable. 47 families who lost fathers, husbands, sons, brothers, all because no one understood that human beings need hot beverages, and if you don't give them a safe way to make them, they'll find an unsafe way. The British understood this. Captain William Roberts understood this. Technical Sergeant Raymond Webber understood this. The lesson is simple: engineer around human behavior, don't fight against it. If you want to learn more about the small engineering decisions that saved lives in World War II, watch our next video about how a 3-second delay in a bomb site won the Battle of Midway. Hit subscribe, we post new stories every 2 days, and leave a comment. Would you have approved the boiling vessel in 1943, or would you have rejected it as non-essential? This is Untold Valor. We find the $7 decisions that saved hundreds of lives.